Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that the entire downfall of Harry and Meghan's relationship with the British royal family could be traced back to a single, seemingly innocent word? Not racism, not betrayal, not even Oprah, but one simple word that made Queen Elizabeth II's blood run cold and sent shockwaves through the marble halls of Buckingham Palace. Today, we're diving deep into the explosive revelations that have just emerged from royal insider Rebecca English, the Daily Mail's fearless royal correspondent who has her finger on the pulse of palace secrets. And what she's uncovered will absolutely blow your mind. Picture this. It's January 2020. The world is watching as Harry and Meghan announce their intention to step back from royal duties. The famous Sandringham Summit has just concluded. The Queen, ever the diplomat, issues a gracious statement respecting their decision. Everyone thinks, well, that's handled rather well, isn't it? But then, Harry and Meghan release their own statement, and buried in the diplomatic language, nestled between pleasantries and promises, sits a word that would make seasoned courtiers gasp in horror. We will continue to collaborate with Her Majesty the Queen. Collaborate? Did you catch that? Because the palace certainly did. And let me tell you, the reaction was nothing short of seismic. The forbidden word. Now you might be thinking, what's wrong with collaborate? It sounds perfectly reasonable. Oh, my dear viewers, you're thinking like a commoner. And I mean that in the most delightful way possible. But you see, when you're dealing with a 1,000-year-old monarchy, words have weight. They have meaning. They have consequences. According to Rebecca English's bombshell reporting, the moment that statement went public, Buckingham Palace went into absolute meltdown. Senior courtiers, these are people who've dedicated their lives to royal protocol, were reportedly raging. One palace insider told English exactly what the problem was. No one collaborates with the Queen. Think about it. The Queen doesn't collaborate. She doesn't brainstorm. She doesn't have working lunches where everyone throws ideas at a whiteboard. She reigns. She commands. She decrees. You don't collaborate with a monarch who traces her lineage back to William the Conqueror. You bow. But Harry and Meghan, they essentially sent a press release to the world saying, hey, we're going to be business partners with Granny. Can you imagine the absolute audacity? It's like announcing you're going to collaborate with God himself. And here's where it gets even juicier. This wasn't just a slip of the tongue. This was a calculated move. Think about it. They had lawyers, PR teams, communications experts. Every word in that statement was scrutinized, debated, and approved, which means Harry and Meghan chose that word deliberately. Royal sources now reveal that this single word was the moment Queen Elizabeth knew, with absolute certainty, that this whole half-in, half-out arrangement was doomed to spectacular failure. One insider told English, this is exactly why Queen Elizabeth knew this whole half-in, half-out version of royalty they were lobbying for was never, ever going to work. The Queen's prophetic rage. Now let's paint the full picture of just how this played out behind those famous palace doors. We're talking about Queen Elizabeth II, a woman who had ruled for nearly 70 years, who had seen off prime ministers, survived world wars, and managed to keep the monarchy relevant in the 21st century. She wasn't exactly known for losing her cool. But that word, collaborate, it hit her like a royal slap in the face. The sources describe her reaction as knowing it would all end in disaster. And my goodness, was she right? Look where we are now. 5 years later, Harry barely speaks to his family. Meghan hasn't set foot in Britain for years, and the rift seems wider than the Atlantic Ocean itself. But here's what makes this story absolutely fascinating. The Queen's reaction wasn't just about protocol, it was about respect. You see, collaboration implies equality. It suggests that Harry and Meghan saw themselves as partners rather than subjects. And for a constitutional monarchy, that's not just wrong, it's revolutionary. But wait, there's more. Because this wasn't the only warning sign that the palace was dealing with. Oh no. The collaborate incident was just the beginning of what sources now describe as a pattern of behavior that left the Queen increasingly concerned about the couple's true intentions. The Gardner incident, when the Queen had enough. Now, if you thought the collaborate controversy was explosive, wait until you hear about what I like to call the Great Gardener Gate of Windsor. And yes, it's as dramatic as it sounds. Picture this scene. Meghan Markle, the former actress turned Duchess, is at Frogmore Cottage, their beautiful Windsor home. She encounters one of the royal gardeners. Now, these aren't just any gardeners, mind you. These are people who have dedicated their lives to maintaining the most prestigious gardens in Britain. They're artists, craftspeople, experts in their field. But according to royal author Hugo Vickers, Meghan was so rude to one of the undergardeners that the head gardener felt compelled to do something unprecedented, complain directly to the Queen. Let that sink in. In the history of the British monarchy, how often do you think gardeners march up to complain about royal behavior? This isn't exactly an everyday occurrence, people. And here's where it gets absolutely delicious. Queen Elizabeth didn't just send a strongly worded memo. She didn't dispatch a private secretary. No. The Queen, the actual reigning monarch of the United Kingdom, got in her car, drove to Windsor, and personally confronted Meghan about her behavior. Can you imagine that conversation? Picture the scene. Meghan probably thinking she's about to have a lovely chat with Granny, and instead getting the royal equivalent of being called to the principal's office. Hugo Vickers explained it perfectly. The head gardener went to complain to the Queen, and she told her off because she obviously didn't like people being rude to staff. This tells us something crucial about Queen Elizabeth's character. Here was a woman who valued respect, kindness, and proper treatment of the people who served the royal household. She wasn't going to stand by and watch anyone, not even her grandson's wife, mistreat her staff. The pattern emerges, but the gardener incident wasn't isolated. Oh dear viewers, we're just getting started on the palace tea-spilling session of the century. According to multiple sources, there was another incident during a food tasting session before Harry and Meghan's wedding. Meghan was sampling dishes when she allegedly told a caterer she could taste egg in what was supposed to be a vegan dish. Fair enough, right? But then she got quite upset, and the way she spoke to the staff caught someone's attention. Suddenly, Queen Elizabeth appeared, because apparently the Queen has superpowers when it comes to detecting rudeness to her staff, and delivered what must be one of the most epic royal put-downs in history. Meghan, in this family, we don't speak to people like that. Chef's kiss gesture. Honestly, can you imagine the silence that must have followed? The sheer crystalline perfection of that royal rebuke? It's like something out of a movie, except it was real life, and the Queen had absolutely had enough. These incidents paint a picture of a pattern, a fundamental clash between American directness and British royal protocol. But more than that, they show us a queen who was paying very close attention to what was happening in her family. The Lilibet bombshell. Now, if you think we've reached the peak of this royal drama mountain, think again, because we haven't even gotten to what I call the Lilibet controversy, the naming scandal that allegedly left Queen Elizabeth more furious than anyone had ever seen her. June 4th, 2021, Harry and Meghan welcome their daughter and announce her name, Lilibet Diana. Beautiful, right? A touching tribute to both the Queen and Princess Diana. The world collectively awed at this apparent olive branch. But according to explosive new revelations from royal biographer Robert Hardman, behind palace doors, it was a very different story. A palace source told Hardman that Queen Elizabeth was as angry as I'd ever seen her when Harry and Meghan claimed they had her blessing to use her most intimate, personal nickname. Think about the name Lilibet for a moment. This wasn't just any royal name. This was deeply personal. It was what little Elizabeth called herself because she couldn't pronounce Elizabeth as a toddler. It was what her beloved father, King George VI, called her. It was what Prince Philip, her husband of 73 years, called her in their most private moments. And according to the Daily Mail's reporting, the Queen's reaction was heartbreaking. She allegedly told an aide, "I don't own the palaces, I don't own the paintings, the only thing I own is my name. And now they've taken that." Pause. Can you imagine the pain in those words? Here was a woman who had given her entire life to service, who owned virtually nothing in her personal capacity, and the one thing that was truly hers, her most intimate family nickname. had been taken and broadcast to the world. The Sussex response and the legal threats. Of course, Harry and Meghan's camp fired back immediately. Their spokesperson insisted that Harry had called his grandmother before the announcement, and that she was the first family member he spoke to. They claimed she was supportive and that they would not have used the name without her blessing. But here's where it gets really spicy. When the BBC reported that palace sources said the Queen wasn't asked for permission, Harry and Meghan's legal team went into full attack mode. Their lawyers, Shillings, started sending threatening letters to media outlets, calling the reports false and defamatory. Think about that for a moment. The palace says one thing, Harry and Meghan say another, and instead of handling it quietly within the family, lawyers get involved. Threatening letters start flying. Legal action is threatened against news organizations. This wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. It had become a public relations war with the monarchy itself. And you know what that meant? The Queen's worst fears about that collaborate statement were coming true in real time. The domino effect. What makes this entire saga so absolutely fascinating is how it all connects. The collaborate controversy wasn't just about one word, it was prophetic. It revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be part of the British royal family. See, Harry and Meghan thought they could cherry-pick the best parts of royal life while discarding the constraints. They wanted the glamour without the protocol, the platform without the restrictions, the titles without the service. But Queen Elizabeth, with her decades of experience and keen understanding of constitutional monarchy, saw exactly where this was heading. When she heard collaborate, she knew she was dealing with people who saw the crown as a business partnership rather than a sacred institution. And she was absolutely right. Look at what's happened since. The Oprah interview that accused the royal family of racism, Harry's memoir, Spare, with its explosive revelations, constant media deals and public statements, a complete breakdown in family relationships. King Charles reportedly not even speaking to his youngest son. Every single thing Queen Elizabeth feared when she heard that word collaborate has come to pass. The Queen's final years. What makes this story even more poignant is understanding how these events affected Queen Elizabeth in her final years. Here was a woman in her 90s dealing with the loss of her beloved husband, Prince Philip, managing the challenges of COVID-19 and trying to hold her family together. And through it all, she had to watch as her grandson and his wife continued to challenge the very foundations of the institution she had devoted her life to preserving. The sources suggest that by the end, the Queen had essentially given up hope of reconciliation. She had firmly parked the Harry issue, as one insider put it. The woman who had spent 70 years keeping the royal family united had reached the conclusion that some bridges were simply too burned to rebuild. Think about the tragedy in that. This was the Queen who had navigated the abdication crisis, World War II, the death of Diana, and countless other challenges. But the combination of that collaborate mentality and the subsequent behavior patterns proved to be something even she couldn't manage. Where we stand today. So here we are in 2025, and where does that leave us? King Charles, according to sources, has completely cut his youngest son loose. The relationship between the brothers, William and Harry, remains fractured. Meghan hasn't returned to the UK in years, and there's no sign of any reconciliation on the horizon. And it all traces back to that moment in January 2020 when Harry and Meghan chose to use the word collaborate instead of words like serve, support, or honor. That single word choice revealed their entire mindset and set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to their complete estrangement from the royal family. The Queen, in her wisdom and experience, saw it all coming. She knew that people who wanted to collaborate with the monarchy didn't understand what the monarchy was. She knew that this fundamental misunderstanding would inevitably lead to conflict, disappointment, and ultimately disaster. The bigger picture. But this story isn't just about Harry and Meghan, is it? It's about the clash between two completely different worlds, the ancient institution of monarchy and the modern celebrity culture of America. It's about tradition versus innovation, duty versus personal freedom, service versus self-actualization. Harry and Meghan represent a generation that believes in rewriting rules, challenging institutions, and creating their own path. The Queen represented a tradition that values continuity, sacrifice, and putting duty before personal desires. Philosophical tone. Neither approach is inherently wrong, but they are fundamentally incompatible. You can't collaborate with a constitutional monarchy any more than you can negotiate with gravity. The institution has its own logic, its own requirements, its own non-negotiable principles. The Queen understood this instinctively. She knew that the moment someone wanted to collaborate rather than serve, they had already chosen a different path. The tragedy is that it took years of public drama, family pain, and institutional damage for everyone else to catch up to what she saw immediately. Closing thoughts. So there you have it, dear viewers. The single word that destroyed Harry and Meghan's relationship with the royal family wasn't spoken in anger or malice. It was chosen deliberately, carefully, and with what they probably thought was diplomatic precision. But words matter, especially when you're dealing with an institution that has survived for over 1,000 years, precisely because it understands the power of language, protocol, and respect. Queen Elizabeth II, in her final years, watched as her greatest fears about collaboration played out exactly as she predicted. She saw the institution she had devoted her life to protecting weather another storm, but at the cost of losing her grandson and his family forever. The next time someone tells you that words don't matter, remember this story. Remember how a single word, collaborate, predicted an entire royal catastrophe. Remember how a 94-year-old queen saw the future more clearly than anyone else in the room. And remember that sometimes the most devastating conflicts begin not with shouting or drama, but with the quiet misunderstanding of what collaboration means to a monarchy that has never needed business partners, only loyal subjects willing to serve. The Queen was right. It did all end in disaster. She just had the wisdom to see it coming from the very first word. Thank you for joining me on this absolutely wild journey through royal secrets and palace intrigue. If this story has taught us anything, it's that when you're dealing with royalty, every word counts, every gesture matters, and sometimes the smallest choices have the biggest consequences. Until next time, keep watching the palace windows. You never know what explosive revelations might be coming next.